Hey everyone, welcome to Unapologetically You with our next guest. And this served as a two-part to our series. And the first episode was between Kelly and I, and we spoke to Louise Collins, who is partner to Chris. And that is who we are welcoming now. So this two-part series was brought in to understand family upbringing, working environments, and traditional roles being reversed. So I cannot wait for you to join me. And yeah, let's get involved. Let's get started.
Obviously, he had to get his hair cut for school, and we were in the barbers, and he's so confident. He's like talking. The guy starts cutting his hair, and he's going, "Excuse me, I'd like to know the name of who cuts my hair. What's your name?" And he's going, "Oh, my name's Jake." And he's asking all these questions. The obvious ones, what's your favourite planet, all these kinds of things. And then a song came on the radio, and the barber kind of did a little jig while he was cutting his hair. And he went, "Why are you dancing?" And he said, "Oh, I just like the song." And then he turns to everyone in the waiting room, and he's going, "Excuse me, man in the jacket, why aren't you dancing?" I'm just there like, "Oscar, just leave people alone." And in 10 minutes later, and everyone's like dancing with Oscar. It's like,
oh my God, he is such a social butterfly, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining me. And obviously Kelly wishes she would have been here to talk to you too. So she got Louise and I in our podcast, and part two, unfortunately, she's renovating her house, and I speak for her when she's probably cringing that she can't be a part of this. So apologies on her behalf, and
That's
obviously
fine.
due to family commitments and things like that. I'm glad I get to grill you all by myself. So this is good. I get you all to myself.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And so the first question I would like to ask is a little bit more about getting our audience to understand who you are, what your background was in sports, what your upbringing was like in school, and what were you like with your family and at university, especially with that sporting background? Because I know a little bit about it, but our audience don't. So can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. Well, I was born in 85, and I was born in Reading at the same hospital Louise was born in, and Oscar was born in, and Henry was born in, actually. I grew up in a little village called Salhampstead, which is a lovely kind of very small, it's kind of centred, or it was at least for me, around a police college, because my dad was in the police. So we grew up in a small kind of cluster of 6 houses. They were originally police houses, and over the years, I think they got sold off to kind of anyone. But when I grew up, there were 3 policemen that lived in this little close. And the police college was a dog section. So I grew up with big police dogs in the garden, and, always kind of active, taking dogs for walks and this kind of thing. And I was really, really lucky because the house backed onto a big wood. And from a very young age, I remember having tree houses. My dad would build tree houses, and my brother, who's 10 years older than me, I'm the middle one of 3, but my brother's 10 years older than me, and he would often kind of upgrade a rope swing, and we'd build dens and bases and pretend we were in the Great Escape and build tunnels and, all these kind of things. So it's very kind of idyllic, very, very lucky to grow up in this kind of environment where you could just go outdoors, and we weren't backing onto busy roads, and there weren't too many neighbours around. So really, really lucky there. My dad, as I said, being in the police, I had a very good example from him because he was always very, very in shape. He lived probably about 2 miles away from work. So he would frequently walk to and from work through the woods with, the police dog, or when he needed the van, he would drive the van to work and walk back home and all this kind of stuff. And he would, from a very young age, kind of get me involved where he could with some of his activities, keeping fit, or, maintaining, keeping the dogs active and all this kind of stuff. So he would frequently take me into work at the weekend to clean the kennels out, or to play on the police assault course they had through the woods, or they had a swimming pool up there, which was like an outdoor swimming pool, and that's where I learned to swim. And I used to go there very, very young with armbands on. And then very, very quickly, my dad kind of would let a little bit of air out, you know, till there was no air in the armbands. And I've got lots and lots of happy memories on that police college. And one of the most exciting places there for me was the police gym. And I remember I've got vivid memories of going into that gym at a very young age. He would always take me in out of hours, so it would be very, very quiet. And, you know, like a Sunday evening or something. And he would go in and just exercise. He'd go in and jump on the rowing machine or do some weights or whatever. And he would let me kind of have free roam. You know, I would maybe run on the running machine or, you know, see if I could do a pull-up on the pull-up bar, all these kind of things. And I just used to find it really exciting. And that kind of excitement walking into a gym has never left me. This kind of magic. Whenever I go into a gym, it kind of brings back childhood memories of, I don't know, you know, being free and you know, just getting that buzz from a workout and that kind of thing. So I had a very good influence, I'd say. I was always sporty, always enjoyed pretty much every kind of sport. So even when I was at nursery, I remember being desperate to win the egg and spoon race and, you know, those kind of things, and the sack race and all that kind of stuff. And when I went to secondary school, I went to the Willink School in Burfield, and I loved doing PE. It was my favourite, you know, thing to do there. I absolutely loved it. I used to play in the football team and the rugby team. I did GCSE PE, so I did lots of new things at that stage where I hadn't tried them before, like trampolining and hockey. And the school at that time, they were just installing a gym. So the first kind of year I was there, there was this old kind of building that they were renovating. I think it was an old outdoor swimming pool that wasn't used anymore. It was awful. It had shopping trolleys and, you know, all kinds of rubbish in, and it was just an abandoned swimming pool. And they got this big grant to turn it into a new indoor swimming pool and a brand new gym. And while I was doing GCSE PE, they started doing, not very often, but they would do kind of, you know, an introduction to strength training. And, you know, that was, again, exciting times in the gym and all that kind of stuff. The only sport I didn't really get on with at school was cricket. And I've got nothing against cricket, but I've got vivid memories of playing cricket, and it was always after school. So whenever you played, you know, your football matches, your rugby matches, your cricket matches, they were always in the evening. And I remember playing a cricket match, and I remember standing around for 2 or 3 hours, and I didn't touch a ball or a bat. And I just stood there thinking, I can be doing more interesting things than this. And I just never played again. So that was the only sport really I didn't really enjoy. But I also did athletics. So I used to, our school used to compete against the other schools in the area. And we would go to a place called Palmer Park, where they had, it was like a very small stand. So you could have like not many people there, but, you know, a few hundred people in the crowd watching. And they were mainly kind of the other schools and parents and teachers. But it had a real atmosphere as being something special, because there were more spectators there, and it was kind of like a small grandstand watching. You know, the big rugby, the big running track around the football pitch, and I used to love those days, big event days. And I used to do 100 meters, 200 meters, and for some reason I used to do discus and triple jump. So I used to do, you know, all sorts of things over the day or two that they would do them. And I used to love it, absolutely love it. Used to try and do sport whenever I could. I also played in the local football team. So I played for, I can't remember how old, probably right at the beginning of secondary school. So probably about, in fact, I think it was the last year of primary school, probably about 10, 11, I started playing for the local football team, Burfield Boys. And initially I played, I can't remember how this arrangement happened. I think I started playing with a friend's brother who was a year above. So I used to play with the team that they were all a year older than me. And that was kind of interesting at first, because when a year at that age is a big deal. You know, everyone's physically bigger than you. Most people don't want you playing with them because they think, why is the young kid in our team and that kind of stuff. So I had lots of resistance. I got on with a couple of people, but lots of people really didn't want me there. So you'd often have, you know, people when the referee wasn't watching, giving you a punch and, you know, trying to knock you to the floor and all this kind of stuff. And I think that kind of was really good for me in a way. Although I didn't really enjoy playing for the team, it kind of toughened me up and, you know, got me quite physically in tune with, you know, balance and, you know, using my strength when I was playing football and these kind of things. And when I went to play for a team where everyone was my age at secondary school, it was a different year of the Boswell boys team. I found it much easier because I was used to playing with, you know, the bigger lads. Suddenly I was physically quite capable and I knew how to, you know, go in for challenges and, you know, make sure I was all right and make sure, you know, I knew how to shield the ball and all these kind of things. And suddenly I kind of really excelled, you know, I felt really, really good playing. And yeah, I won a few like local awards and, you know, players of the year, you know, just like small kind of things in the local team. And I wouldn't say I ever wanted to be a footballer. That kind of idea never particularly appealed to me. So I didn't have the kind of passion that, you know, some people have playing football, but I used to love the social aspect of it. I used to love playing with my friends and, you know, going to away days when all the dads would take their sons in the car park at the local post office and you'd all follow the leader to the next town and play the rival teams. And I used to love that. And few years into my playing days with Boswell boys, I got scouted by Henley Town, semi-professional team, and that kind of changed everything playing for football, because I was probably just before, maybe a year before turning into men's football, which I think is 16 off the top of my head. And the whole environment of playing football then stopped being kind of playing with your mates and having fun and that camaraderie of, you know, who you were playing with. And it suddenly changed to a much more serious atmosphere where there was a lot more competition for places. And because there were contracts where, I mean, you didn't earn much money. It was petrol money for your parents to take you to Henley, basically. But people were on kind of like £150 contracts a month and these kind of things. And it became very, very competitive and very clinical. And I remember during my trials for Henley, I remember the environment of, you know, all of the players would be out in these beautiful facilities, you know, these beautiful playing fields, and you'd all be doing ball work or, you know, physical training, or you might be playing a match. And at the side, always at the side of the pitch, in this little kind of stand, there would be all the directors, and in the middle there'd be the chairman with a big book, and he'd be picking players to sign contracts. And he would kind of walk onto the pitch in the middle of the game, walk up and tap someone on the shoulder and then pull them off. And you kind of look there and see someone else going off and think, oh, it's not me, I'm not going to get picked. And, you know, it was a very kind of different environment. And I kind of stopped enjoying playing as much. It became a much, much different thing for me. And the other kind of crossroads in my life was I was learning to play the guitar at the time. And my brother was actually playing in a few bands, being a few years older than me. He just played Reading Festival. And I remember going to Reading Festival and watching him play guitar on this big stage in front of a few thousand people and looking and thinking, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing a bit of that, you know. And I remember just thinking I wanted to spend more and more time with my instrument and play guitar and all this kind of stuff. And while I was thinking about all of this and thinking about, you know, having to commit more time to Henley, you know, with the football, and they would train a lot more in the week than I was used to, which was great for my health because I got really, really fit at that time, but just, you know, it wasn't good for my soul at that time. And I went away to Newquay with some friends from school, and we were messing around in the swimming pool, as you do at that age, and we were kind of moving too quickly up the stairs to a water slide. And as I was kind of jogging up these stairs, my foot slipped on a puddle, and it went through the railings, and I kind of fell back with my legs still stuck between the railings, and I twisted my knee, and the pain was considerable to the point where I knew it was, you know, going to need a lot of rest. And my knee went, I don't bruise very easily, but my knee went black, you know, all around. It was really, really bruised. and I got it checked out, and luckily it was only a sprain, but I couldn't walk for for a couple of weeks. It was awful, and I couldn't run for ages. Couldn't kick a ball. It took me quite a while to get fully fit, and during that time I kind of came to the decision that I didn't want to play football for Henley anymore. So I stopped going and stopped playing, and that was the last time I remember being super fit, really enjoying my football and all that kind of stuff. And then it just drifted away. So after that, it was about the time I left school, and I went to Reading College, and I studied music technology. So I was full kind of, interested in music, wanting to spend as many hours of the day on my instrument as I could, try and get better, try and writing songs with people, playing in bands, this kind of stuff. And that was probably quite a transitional period in my life, because when you're young and you're at school and you play in teams and all this kind of stuff, exercise is so easy to fit in because it's something you just do. You're always kicking a ball about, walking to someone's house, all these kind of things just come as second nature. And that was probably the first time where suddenly you had to really organize yourself if you were going to play football with your mates, or be it five-a-side or whatever it might be. So it became very different. And obviously my free time then, where I would be playing football and training and that kind of thing, was now spent kind of sat playing guitar, or stood playing guitar, or whatever, not really moving a whole lot. So I still had youth on my side. So you don't really get unfit like that at that age. You stay kind of, eat what you want, do what you want, you don't look any different, that kind of thing. And it took probably a few years into my working life where I started to probably suffer for not playing exercise, not playing football, not exercising as much. I still did exercise, like I would when I started working. I would play for the work six-a-side team, and those kind of things. I've always enjoyed skipping, so every now and again I'll get the skipping rope out and think I was just as fit as I always used to be. And I've had weights around the house where I would kind of do a workout every now and again. But it was as I got older and as my metabolism changed, I think it took a few years before I realized that had happened, and suddenly that you have to work a bit harder and you have to suddenly watch what you eat and all that kind of thing. So I didn't kind of balloon in weight or feel suddenly really unfit, but I definitely started noticing, suddenly you'd think, oh, I'm a size up in my trousers, and sometimes I would think I was really fit, and I would play a football match, and the next day you would just feel awful. You'd stand up and you think, my legs, they shouldn't feel like this. There were just kind of little changes going in. And I remember one good thing at that time, I went through quite a difficult time at that period of my life, because I lost, within a few months, I lost 3 of my friends, all unrelated, different reasons. And it was quite a stressful period. And I used to find the six-a-side football that I used to do once a week was my huge release. I would walk onto the football field and it would feel like all the stresses of the day and the week were just being washed away. And I think it was that physical exertion of just, expending all your energy. I used to love that. And I've always connected with that, that feeling of, I don't know, almost achievement when you exercise and you put your all into it, that kind of rush of endorphins you get afterwards. Always from being very young to those days playing football, even to now, that always is a really good stress reliever for me. So yeah, exercise at that time was more about stress relief more than anything. It was just kind of feeling better rather than keeping in particularly good shape. And so my jobs probably became more and more sat at a desk, not moving too much, not walking very far, these kind of things. Desks where Louise and I met at the job where we worked in Reading, and we used to look after a help desk where we would be kind of glued to the phones. While we were there, we couldn't leave the desk. You had to make sure you're answering the phones, and obviously you'd be doing emails and all that kind of stuff. you just wouldn't move in the day, and you know, you couldn't even get up every hour and go for a walk, or you know, it would be quickly, you know, then get something to eat, get back to your desk, go to the toilet, get back to your desk. It was that kind of routine, and I think that was really, really bad for my health, because I started getting injuries around that time, and the one that's plagued me more than anything has been, or certainly was, back problems. It started off as a very sore back, and I used to put this down to just sitting all day, and I kind of, you know, the stereotypical hunched shoulders, you know, poor posture, all that kind of stuff. And I would have desk assessments, and I would get a better chair, and they would come and say, move your monitor a little bit higher, and all this kind of stuff. And it just kept getting worse. And it got to the stage where I was getting back spasms, and it started off kind of every now and again, and it started becoming more and more frequent, to the point where there were certain things that would always trigger it. So I would have a pull-up bar at home, and if I would jump up on the pull-up bar and try and do pull-ups, 9 times out of 10, it would just feel like someone had put a cattle prod in my back, and it would feel like I'd been electrocuted, and I kind of drop off the bar, and that was it for kind of 3 weeks. I could hardly move. It was awful. And then it got to things like, I would get up in the morning feeling okay, and I would lean over the sink to brush my teeth, and exactly the same thing, spasm, 3 weeks, 3-4 weeks, couldn't move properly. And so I got into the habit of, I would try and exercise for a while, and I would, do whatever. I would do some running, do some rowing. I bought a rowing machine at that time. Maybe I would do some weights, that kind of thing. And I would be quite good with it for a couple of weeks. And I'd start feeling a little bit fitter, start feeling in a routine. And then my back would spasm, and then I couldn't move for 3 weeks. So I was in this constant cycle of, start to get fit, injury, can't do anything. Start to get fit, injury, can't do anything. And it was really depressing. And I used to, I sought help from all sorts of people. I went to the doctors, so I saw four I think different GPs, and I got some really strange advice. One doctor told me that she thought it was because my diet was poor and I smoked, and I kind of told her my diet was good. I've never smoked, and what's that got to do with my back, kind of thing. And she just kind of printed me these stereotypical kind of exercises to do, like a couple of sit-ups and these kind of things, which I kind of did anyway, but I would do them and it wouldn't help, and that kind of thing. I saw another doctor who, when I told him that there were trigger points such as pull-ups and things like that, he just said, maybe you should just stop doing pull-ups. That was his grand plan. And I said to him, I don't want to stop doing pull-ups. That's not the point. I want to find a way to fix the problem.
Yeah.
It was really, really depressing. So eventually I got a referral to see physios, and I saw a few physios. I had some bad luck with physios, because the first physio I saw, he actually died during my treatment, and he was very, very sick, and I didn't realize he was going through cancer treatment. So I kind of started having some, I don't know, progress. I probably didn't see him long enough to say I was having progress, but I was seeing this guy, and then tragically he passed away. And so I had to get referred to someone else, which took weeks and weeks and weeks. Eventually I saw someone else, and this person was very, very old school chiropractor, and not chiropractor, physio. And he was one of the chaps that kind of bent you into a strange shape on the bed and then just slammed all his weight down, and you hear a massive crack. It's that kind of thing. And it would kind of feel all right for a few seconds, and he said, you should be fine now. And within a week it would spasm again, and I'd feel really depressed, and it was awful. And saw all kinds of physios and had all kinds of exercises, and just didn't get anywhere. I saw a chiropractor regularly. Physios always say don't see chiropractors, but I was desperate. I thought, I'm going to see a chiropractor, I'm going to see a physio. I had a personal trainer at that time, and I kind of plateaued. I did feel a lot better at that time, while I was training with her, and I trained with her for quite some time, and I did feel a lot better with her. But the problem I had was there were still some things that would trigger it. So I knew I knew if I did certain things, I would feel it go, and I would almost feel just before it went, it would almost feel like it would tighten, and I would think, oh no, it's going to go, and then it would go. And so I couldn't get rid of it for ages. And really, I would say only in the last year have I kind of got on top of that problem, where I've kind of stripped everything back, because I thought, I've tried all these different things, I've had all these different prescriptions. You know, one GP just wanted to put me on these really powerful painkillers without sending me to the physio, and I was like, I'm not taking them. I don't want to take painkillers, you know, for something that surely we can get to the bottom of. And so I would always refuse pain relief because I just didn't see the point of it. You know, masking pain's one thing, but it's going to go anyway, and I could do more damage. So I never liked that idea. But with my own training, I just kind of stripped everything back, and I started to. I've always been interested in you know, keeping fit in the body and everything, and I really just started looking at how the back works and how all the back muscles interact with each other. And I think I probably did myself some harm over the years, where I was lifting. I've never lifted heavy weights because my weights have always been at home. So I usually, apart from when I've had a trainer, don't have a spotter. So I usually have to, you know, work out ways to exhaust myself and, you know, get good workouts myself. But I think for that time, when I didn't have the trainer, I started training probably quite poorly, not in terms of technique so much, but in terms of exercise choice. And I started lifting as heavy as I could, you know, and I got quite strong with certain things like, you know, bent over rows. I used to do lots of rowing and things like that. And I had quite big traps at the time. And I think I had underdeveloped lower traps and, you know, things like that. So I think I had muscle imbalances. And I think a combination of poor training, you know, with these muscle imbalances growing, and just sitting for a living and not exercising, not moving enough, I think that was a really lethal combination. And that's what sent me into this cycle. But I just started lowering all the weights that I lift, going really, really light, and just start kind of breaking down, you know, thinking about all the things that I haven't thought of before, thinking, right, where's the teres major? Right, I'm going to start concentrating there. Right, where's my lower traps? How do I activate them? You know, all these kind of things, strengthening my core, all these kind of things. And as, you know, the last year has kind of ticked by, touch wood, I haven't had a muscle spasm in several months. I feel like I've cured the problem. And I've kind of trained a little bit more, you know, thinking about the whole body and everything moving, you know, together, and not kind of focusing on how much I can lift on some things, and, you know, just try and focus a bit more like that. So I feel like I've solved that kind of problem. It's funny talking about lifting heavy and things. I remember when Louise and I moved in together, and we spent lots of money on a nice bed because I was having all these back problems, and I was like, I need a nice bed, and I need something that's going to look after my back. And we went on holiday to Cuba in 2010, and I remember thinking at the time, I can't go on like this. You know, I've got to look at how I'm training. I've got to kind of, you know, swim more. I've got to do things that loosen me up, all this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, well, this is a perfect chance because we'll be on holiday. There's no one around. I could go to the resort gym and, you know, get a good workout in the morning, go and sit on the beach, swim in the sea, all this kind of stuff. I remember day one, I walked into this gym with my shorts and my t-shirt on, and I opened the door, and there were about 6 or 7 blokes that looked like they just stepped off the Mr. Olympia stage. They can't have walked in through the door I walked in. They were huge. And it was that thing where you walk in, it just went silent. Everyone stopped lifting and just turned to look at me like, what are you doing here? And I looked around, and I walked to the other side of the gym and pretended I was looking for someone, looked both ways and just walked straight out. I was like, no, forget that. I was like, that's not happening. So I left. So I think stopping kind of thinking about, you know, how much I was lifting was a good thing for me, and a bit more, you know, like that. But now, obviously, fatherhood, I've got 2 boys of my own. Oscar is 4 and Henry is 2. And I feel like kind of my fitness journey so far, if you like, has come full circle, because I remember being a boy and being very influenced with my dad, as I said. And I kind of feel that responsibility now, where I need to keep myself fit and healthy. And I would love my boys to look at me and think, ah, dad's exercising, or dad's looking after himself. Maybe I might try that. And so I kind of, over the years, I've been building up a kind of home gym, if you like. So I've got a fair bit of equipment upstairs. I've got concept rower, we've got a spin bike, we've got pull-up bars, little dip station, we've got a bench, we've got free weights, bands, we've got all sorts of things. I can, lockdown's actually been all right for me, because I've got so much equipment up there. I haven't missed going to the gym or anything. I try and encourage the boys, especially Oscar, because he's a bit more aware of exercise, being a bit older. I kind of encourage them to come in, and if I'm exercising, I'll leave the door open. Yeah, come in, see what I'm doing, and if you'd like to try and do a pull-up, I'll kind of encourage them to do that. So I think it's come full circle, really. So where I used to watch my dad, I now think about them watching me. So,
and children always imitate anyway. They don't listen to you so much as they'll just do as you do. And I feel like what I found interesting from what you said earlier about you being so incredibly active, and then you went to a stage where you were incredibly sedentary.
yeah.
And I had experience of that. So I went from being completely active, and I moved into an area manager role, and I was still coaching in the evening. So I essentially had two jobs going on at the same time. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I want to keep training, I want to keep running, and I want to keep my job in the office. But the amount of time that I was sat down, I knew that was my trigger to my lower back pain. So I completely resonate with you. But what I found interesting is what you said is you can go from being incredibly active to sedentary, and you can still develop these problems. And I don't think many of our audience they may have experienced it, but how quickly the activity can drop and how quickly your body can respond to that. And it just means that you can't let it slide, you can't let it slip. But despite that, there's a lot of jobs who do rely on information technology, sat at desks, and it is difficult to move from your desk. So I completely resonate with you. And you just never found any relief, right? Whatever chair they gave you, whatever height the computer was at, it just wasn't good enough. And the aggravation that you experienced, I don't know about you, but tell me a little bit more about how you overcame that mentally, because a lot of people, it's so draining. And to have the reoccurring issues, you just feel so disheartened. What did you experience from it, and how did you overcome that and be resilient as a consequence?
I think it probably helped that I'm a very stubborn person. If someone says you can't do something, I'm always the person to kind of, my heckles go up and I think, no, I'm going to do it now, that kind of thing. And when I started having back problems, the amount of people that told me this is just how it is, this is what you now have to live with, from GPs just saying, just take pain relief, when it happens, not if it happens, when it happens, take these really strong painkillers and they will help. To physios even saying, just swim a bit more, that kind of thing, and it will help. To a personal trainer told me, just don't do pull-ups, do other things, just don't do pull-ups. And I used to think, but there's a reason why this is happening, and I'm not after pain relief. I'm not after what to do when it happens. I'm after what's causing it.
You were trying to get to the why, and that's similar to what I'm like. Why is this happening, and why is this occurring? What can I do to change it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was so frustrating, because I think it's difficult because when you see people, I mean, I suppose the NHS has their budget to deal with the most serious things, and the least serious things get less budget. And they can only send certain amount of people to physio, and x-rays cost money, and all these kind of things. There are always other parameters when these people look into these situations. So I think at the end of the day, your own body more than anyone. My brother's a good example of that, because I remember my brother, he started having head pains and headaches and these kind of things years ago now. And he went to the doctors when he started getting, almost looked like he had a lump on his head. Like the cartoon where you get a bump on the head and the lump just goes, it looked just like that. And he went to the doctors 4 times. And the first doctor said, you've obviously just hit your head. The second doctor said, it's just a bit of swelling, it'll go down. The third doctor said, I think you've been stung by a bee, and gave him some kind of cream to rub through his hair and said it will go down. The fourth doctor, and he saw the fourth doctor because he knew, what he was being told wasn't right. He said, I know my body at the end of the day, and this feels kind of like it's getting serious. Feels like I've got pressure on my head as well as the pain. And the fourth doctor eventually said, all right, you won't leave us alone. I'll send you for a scan. And he went for a scan, and he had a brain tumor. And he ended up having to have brain surgery and having the tumor, cut out and all this kind of stuff. And I always think back to that, obviously that's a lot more serious than back pain, but it's the same kind of principle. When you have a niggle or an injury, or, it's not always good to just accept what you're told. You should really think it over and think about how things work for you and challenge things. And like you said, why is probably the most important question, finding out why something's happening. If you don't know the why, keep looking. And that was my attitude with my back. I used to think, I don't know the answer to why, so I'm not happy with that. And, whenever someone would say, this is just the way it's going to be, or this is what you have to put up with, I'd just be very stubborn and very determined in thinking, I'm not going to accept that. And, my dad beat cancer last year. He had cancer and had to have an operation, had a third of his bowel removed and chemotherapy and all that kind of stuff. And he has the same attitude, which I think is probably where I get it from. All that stuff going on, and there was, in his mind, there was no way that was going to beat him. He just has this determination that, I don't care what the odds are, I will fight through it. And I think that kind of thing's definitely rubbed off on me. And even in a way of just not accepting an answer, I was just determined to just keep trying and keep, I would still be trying now. If I hadn't fixed it, I would be thinking of any kind of alternative medicine, or training with different people, or whatever it was. I would still be kind of pulling rocks up, trying to look underneath them, finding out. And at the end of the day as well, it was affecting my quality of life. There were things that I couldn't do. Picking up my children, I remember when they were very young, when Oscar was very young and I was still having back spasms, I would pick him up when he couldn't walk, and we might be out at the shops, or we might be walking, he might run towards something dangerous, and I would have to grab him, and I would pick him up and feel vulnerable is the best way I can explain it. It would feel like my back was about to kind of twang and spasm, and I just had this constant feeling of kind of fear, really, that it was going to go. And I just remember thinking, as Oscar got bigger and then Henry came along, I thought, I can't do this like this. I've got to find a way. And that's what led me to, really knuckle down in my kind of knowledge of the back. Not that I'm an expert by any means, but just trying to dissect how the muscles interact with each other, and where I could kind of cut out some of the larger muscles and focus more on some of the the smaller muscles that in a compound exercise, for instance, might get lost and underdeveloped and that kind of thing. And it's just solved the problem. It just really helped me very quickly. And I also I've concentrated more on mobility. So I try and not do, when I exercise, I try not kind of just stand still the whole time. I try and do things that are more reflective of real life, you know, moving and, you know, chaining exercises together into patterns, and, you know, like the way you train, that kind of thing. And I found that to be hugely beneficial. I think for many years when I used to play football, because it was dynamic and, you know, you're always changing direction and shielding the ball from people and moving your weight and all these kind of things, I think that kind of training just took care of itself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I probably had to learn to overcome this, is when, as you go through life and, you know, your metabolism changes and you're not doing all this exercise for free, you're having to schedule it all in, you really have to think about what you're doing, but also what you're not doing, because those things aren't a given anymore. A bit like you said, you know, once you were working those two jobs, suddenly things ultimately go on the back burner, and you have to remember what's on the back burner and kind of bring them out when you can, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good lesson for those who maybe are suffering with something in their body and they don't quite know what it is just persevere. Yeah. I love the fact that you said, you know, even if you're going to medical professionals, don't accept the first, second, even third answer, because if you don't feel something is right, you need to keep persevering and you need to keep pushing. And I think there's been different stories about how women aren't being listened to by the medical profession. And it's like, well, we know what's going on in our bodies and we need to keep pursuing that. Otherwise, we're never going to get a result. And I find that the lesson overall is just to say, be persistent, be persistent in trying to find the answers. And I feel like your attitude was trying to find the reasons why and stay curious. Like there's so much information on the internet these days, and obviously with professionals, if you can find professionals who know what they're doing and can advise the right course of action, that would be great. But there is a lot of information, and it's really hard to dissect between good quality information and something that's just made up. And I think that once you go to a professional and rely on what they're telling you, you know what works for you. And as you said, it's going to be trial and error as well. Like you've tried so many different things, but now you've got a history of something that's been consistently working, and you just repeat that. And as soon as you divert from that area, you know that that's going to be the cause of why the pain has come back. So it's really good. That's a really good story about just learning a little bit more and staying curious about your body, listening to your body and what it's telling you. So
it's interesting with learning, because I was born in 85, and I remember growing up at school before mobile phones, before the internet, before all this kind of stuff. If you wanted information, you went to the library or, you know, you read a book at school, or you asked someone. There wasn't, you know, there weren't the options that there are today. And I remember being at school when mobile phones came out, and then the internet became a thing. People started getting email addresses, and now, comparing it to now, I think it's obviously a good thing because there's so much information out there, but I think it can get overwhelming because there's good information out there, but there's also bad information. And I've seen it with members of my family where people will diagnose themselves. You know, they look at the internet and they'll read something terrible and they'll think, oh no, I've got this, or the opposite way, they'll look at something and think, right, this is what I need to solve this problem. And you look at it and think, no, this is a fad, don't do this. You know, it's really difficult now. So
it is 100%. I remember being at university doing my strength and conditioning masters, and even then it was trying to understand which journals you should rely on and how to dissect the information from research articles, because there's going to be some that are horseshit and there's going to be the other ones who are genuinely valuable, and you need to dissect and look for certain things in the abstract, in the studies, in the findings, and you're like, there's a whole host of information that can trap you. And I feel like this is where people trip over the headlines, especially when it's like, oh, research says this is good for you, this is bad for you. And it's like, wait a second, investigate a little bit more, especially if you care about your body and your health and well-being. That's definitely something that yeah, I think you're a different specimen where you do grill down and try and find, which muscles are working what, and trying to be a bit more functional that would serve you day to day. But people sometimes just want an easy quick. And I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes going to a qualified professional or an S&C coach, if you've got access to it, definitely serves you. And it's not to say the fitness instructors don't have that knowledge. It's just trying to dissect between which type of knowledge you're looking for. So, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
it's good. It's good.
Well, lots of the things that I would research myself, I are probably ideas that I would pinch off my old coach from years ago, and she would have me do things like, I don't know, TikTok with a band, working glute medius, and all these kind of things that as soon as you're in a gym, maybe with your mates, you're a load of blokes together or something, no one's picking up the band doing glute medius exercises and these kind of things. And they're the kind of things that I used to think back and think, what did I do in those days, and what things don't I do? And those kind of, looking into the smaller things, putting pieces of the puzzle together used to help. But definitely, if you can, see a professional and get that opinion, then that's where you should start, because it's so easy to go down a wrong path, on your own. So easy.
So I wanted to digress more into the family life and what you've established with Louise and with your two beautiful boys. And I remember when we were working together and she told me that you're staying home and raising the boys, I had such admiration, and it's so refreshing to hear that there aren't that many men that I know who have been taking on roles and putting their own career on hold, because it's so common for women to do it. So when I heard this from Louise, I just wanted to ask, what did you do before taking on this level of responsibility, and how did you and Louise both come to this decision that you would wanted to take time out of your career?
Well, when Louise and I moved in together, we had met in kind of facilities management. We were in the facilities world, running buildings and all that kind of stuff. And I'd gone on to work in the same kind of field, another job, and she was doing the same. She was working in London, and it came to the time when there was a transitional period where I had left my job, and she was at the stage where Oscar was born, and we were at the stage where I had to find a new job, or she had to go back to work, and we were, going over everything really. And it's kind of strange thinking back to it, because at the time we discuss everything together like that, big decisions we'll go through, and pluses, minuses, kind of think about it all, logically as we can. And at the time, I don't remember when we came up with that decision thinking it was a big deal per se. I used to think, Oscar was, I forget exactly how old Oscar was. He wasn't breastfeeding or anything, obviously. He was at the stage where I could do everything with him. I could feed him, I could, take him out, could play with him, could, teach him, engage with him, all these kind of stuff. It was, working fine. And it was just right for us at that time. And we decided, because of our work situations, that, Louise would end up going back to work, and I would start looking after Oscar. And it wasn't till probably, the months after that, and seeing people's reactions, that it really hit home that it wasn't a normal thing to do. It was interesting because at first, I would say, thinking back to reactions from people when we would tell them, oh yeah, Louise has gone back to work and, I'm at home with Oscar, I'd say most blokes would kind of do a double take and look at me as if I was mad, and kind of be like, you're what? Oh, right, that's really good. And no one would criticize it or anything, but you could tell people were a bit surprised.
Yeah.
And most of our female friends and most women we spoke to thought it was really good, and they would say, oh, that's brilliant, fantastic, good for you going back to work, and good for you looking, so it was kind of that kind of mix. I'd probably say over time it's kind of jumbled up a little bit, where like I've got a friend of mine who's got older children, they're still teenagers just about, and he always used to say to me, I think you're really lucky because I missed out on lots of that stuff. You know, the stereotypical dad traveling, you know, commuting to London and getting back late, and, you know, having sometimes a few minutes in the evening with your children, and otherwise it's weekends kind of thing. You know, that was very much his life when he had young kids. And he used to always say, you're just really lucky, because lots of dads miss out on that.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt very lucky for exactly that reason. I was definitely aware that lots of my friends, you know, were doing the opposite. They would be at work and, you know, would see their children a lot less than I was. But it's interesting with him, because as time sort of went on, he would say things like, oh, you know, it's great having all that time, but when you go back to work, you know, that kind of thing. And that those kind of comments would creep in. And you kind of, you know, sometimes you kind of think, am I doing something really weird, or is this normal? But I think at the end of the day, we've both got, you know, we make our decisions together,
Mm-hmm.
and we always try and make our decisions, you know, as most people do, for your family first and foremost. So we, you know, we're in a situation where we think, is this the right thing to do? Then we go for it, and we, you know, we don't worry about what other people think. I would say it definitely got harder when Henry came along, because there's not much time between our two boys. When Henry came along, Louise was on maternity leave with Henry, and she went back to work a lot quicker than she did with Oscar, and that was really difficult for both of us. That was definitely the most difficult time, because you had Louise, who had postnatal depression, and she was finding everything really hard. She felt that she was, you know, on the one hand doing the right thing and needed to get back to work, and was also conscious that, as you know, women always think about, if you're away from work too long, even if you've got good reason, you know, and things are ticking away at work, you know, people might start turning around and thinking, oh, are you still needed? And all, you know, so she had all these demons kind of in. It was literally just at the time where Henry had just, in fact, he was actually still breastfeeding when she went back to work. So she would.
I remember her pumping in the.
Yeah, she would be pumping at work, you know, and she would leave me the bottles. And Henry, bless him, wasn't happy with me giving him the milk. So I was at home not wanting to show any kind of stress at all to her, you know, thinking the last thing she needs is me going, this is hell here, you know. So I would be like, no, everything's cool, you know, Oscar's been great, Henry's had a feed, and you know, and Henry would be feeding, but it would be hours of rejection and little feed here, you know. It was a nightmare. It was really, really difficult. And eventually it got easier, and we kind of got over it, but it's not a period that I look back on and think, you know, oh, those were great days. I look back on and think, you know, that was an achievement that we got through it, you know, more than anything. But you know, she did great, because she did both roles. She did the mother thing, where she was, you know, when she was here, she was, you know, Henry just wanted her, so she was with Henry all the time. And when she was at work, obviously she was still pumping, and you know, she was trying to get a day's work done, and you know, thinking about what things were like here. And you know, when we would have phone calls and she'd hear screaming in the background, and I'd be like, oh, he's just woken up, you know. So you know, they were tough days. They were really tough days. But I don't think either of us regret doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it's been a good thing for me in many ways. One, I feel like I've got a really good relationship with my boys. You know, mum always has great chance of a great relationship, because she bonds with them straight away, and you know, she's got a great relationship with them. But I feel like I've got some extra dad time with them, where we've been able to develop real bonds, and I feel very, very lucky for that. I also feel it's been a kind of time of reflection for me, because being, you know, doing the jobs that I did, one, where I would be sitting at a desk not moving very much, two, working in an industry that I didn't choose, I just kind of found myself in, and also three, if you look at the climate we're in now, you know, with these times where, you know, jobs that are becoming, easier to get, and jobs that are maybe the ones to aim for and the ones not to aim for. All that's changing right now with COVID. It's all the games are changing. So I do feel like I'm in a time of reflection where I can concentrate on, as the boys spend more time at school and nursery, I can start getting a job to bring some money in, but I can also start retraining in something and thinking about the next step in my career and doing something that's a bit more active, a bit more interesting, so lots of boxes to tick. So, but it's definitely been rewarding. Definitely, don't regret it.
Good, I'm glad. Well, I wanted to go back to something interesting that you said regarding postpartum depression. So I know that Louise had spoke about it in her segment earlier in the podcast, and the way she was overcoming things, and she relied on you heavily, and obviously your relationship and your bond goes to show how much you supported her. But what was it like from your aspect? And if any new dads are listening, and what signs were there that triggered and caused red flags for you, even if she wasn't quite aware of it? Because I know the story because I was quite close to her at work. But what can you suggest for new dads regarding, what were the flags and how can they be supportive during this crucial time and dealing with a newborn?
Well, I think there are so many things that mum goes through at that time, from the changes in your body to all the hormone imbalances to, the lack of sleep that you always get, to changing demands, mentally and physically, to having to think about going back to work at some point, to thinking about what others are thinking, be it at work or judging you being a mum, or, all these kind of things. There are so many pressures that it's immeasurably difficult. I can't imagine what she went through. And I think you have to pay close attention. I mean, your partner at the end of the day. And, when you look, past all those stresses that would be stressful anyway, you have to look for, depression, I suppose, is a difficult thing because it can manifest in different ways. But when people start just not smiling at all and finding things that they would normally find joy in, be it something on the TV to time of day, when everyone's asleep, where you can enjoy yourself. When you start seeing these things that would normally trigger a good response, not, no response at all. And, I wouldn't say her whole outlook changed, but there were flags where her opinions just started to be more negative. And, it was a tough time. And, you doubt yourself and all these kind of things. You've just got to really, really look for these red flags and convince. It's very difficult because Louise, I don't think, realized that she was struggling so much at first. It was me that said, look, I think you should talk to someone. I could see the stresses were just boiling over, and she was just, sad lots of the time, and, not being as interested in some things, and, going places, seeing people, put people off, that kind of thing. And, she's very good at putting a mask on and pretending that things are better than they are. When you're having a bad day or feeling really down, unless you really know her, and this is the same for everybody, you know your partner more than anyone else. Unless you really would be able to see those flags due to that, it would be very difficult to see. But I could just tell that she just needed some help, and I couldn't give it to her. The things that I would try and do, like if I would try and in the early days, I would take one of the boys off to a room and just sit with them so that they wouldn't wake up and need her. And I'd just say, go and sleep. Sleep is what you need. And sleep deprivation makes everything worse. So you've got that on top of everything else. Feeding, once I could give them bottles, all these kind of things where I would try and take the work off, and things like just making sure the house runs okay, making sure that the house is clean and dinner's cooked, and all those kind of things, all the unnecessary stresses that you try and take off to make their life easier, when all those things still are sort of not helping at all. I knew she needed some outside help, and I knew I got to the stage where I wasn't getting through to her when I would try and put a positive spin on things, or when I would try and talk about things. Just I wasn't getting through. And that's when I said to her, look, you need to talk to someone. And I would remind her we did an NCT course, and they're all over that and those kind of courses and all the books, and they say, you're the partner's the one that has to be the one that says, just go and talk to someone and go and get some outside help. And luckily she was quite receptive to that. She didn't kind of bat me away. That made her realize, okay, I think she said right at the start, she said, if I ever get postnatal depression, make sure you tell me, and make sure you just say you need to talk to someone, and I'll know, think back to this conversation. So I think that was quite helpful. And once that happened, that got the ball rolling. But in terms of advice, it's a difficult one, because I try to think of the saying. I heard someone say once, we spend so much time comparing our behind the scenes to other people's highlight reels. You know what I mean? Like you'll sit there with the nuts and bolts of everything that's going wrong, and the late nights, and whatever it is, money worries, sleep worries, whatever the thing is, and all the insides and outs and the small print and everything, and you'll look at maybe someone who might be a friend, who might be a work colleague, who might be someone that's done what you're doing before, might be someone on social media, and you only ever see what they want you to see, or what they tell you, or whatever. You never see what's going wrong with them, or the struggles they have, and all these kind of things. And I think that's a big piece of advice. I think to not be so harsh on yourself by thinking, I'm not doing this, or we should have done that, or that kind of thought, and to kind of think, everyone has their problems, and talking about them with people and asking for help is not a bad thing. I think that's definitely a big thing. I'd say talking is the biggest thing, but just recognizing that these things can come out of nowhere.
And it's like you said, she wasn't aware of it, and she needed somebody to intervene and understand that something is different here. And there has been numerous stories from various women who didn't realize that they were going through something. And I feel like, just being an attentive friend, partner, whoever you are, and then approaching them in a compassionate way to say, something's different here. And then obviously when Louise had said to you, please intervene if you find something that isn't right, and obviously you did. So I think having that level of communication, you can't veer too far from the path if you've got that level of honesty and communication in a partnership. So thank you so much. That was a great answer. We're going to go into some quick fires now. So quick fire question round. Now, there's no pressure about quick fires. Some people give us like one-liners. Some people give us like a big story. So There is no pressure on this one. But I just wanted to ask, one of the quick fires was, what would you say things that have served you into becoming a better person, a better partner, and a dad to your two boys? Like, what would you say helps you become an encompassing better person, partner, father?
Wow, that's a big question. Well,
I know.
I think I try and think back on past experiences. I try and think back on some of the examples I've had in my life, some of them good, some of them maybe not so good. I try and think, I often think back to my dad actually for examples, especially now I'm a dad. And I think back to the kind of things that I would think when I looked up to him. And, I can think of lots of times when he would lead by example. And, it can be really small things. Like I can remember times when there've been, rows, and, someone's been having a go, being a policeman, someone maybe having a go at him or something like that. And he would never, ever rise to the bait. And he would always be very kind of stoic in not getting angry and treating people the same. And, he would do things frequently. Like I remember driving through a village called Feel. And as we drove down the road, there was an elderly gentleman that just collapsed, literally just right in front of the car. My dad just calmly parked the car got out and started giving him mouth to mouth, and the guy had, got really sick, and saved his life. They called the ambulance, got him there, and my dad just got back in the car and was like, yeah, he's okay. And then we drove off and carried on. That kind of calm, kind of thinking about the situation, not letting things bubble into something else, and just getting on with it. I think that's something that applies to, I try and apply it to all my thinking, both in my relationship and with my children, and just being a better person. I think I try and remember that specifically, because I probably do have quite a big mouth. In an argument, I'm usually the one that says the thing that you think, I've gone too far, I shouldn't have said that. So I often think back to him and think, no, he wouldn't say that. He would shut your mouth there, and he would, let someone else let some steam off, and then I'll talk to them later, that kind of thing. So I try and kind of think that, even when I'm with my boys and something might happen, there might be some stress in the day, and I kind of think, no, my dad wouldn't get angry at this, or my dad would be calm. And I just try and think that they're watching me, and they'll remember these things probably more than I will, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so,
that's a really good role model to have, not only for yourself but to pass on to your children as well, and to figure out, not only has he helped you, be more stoic, have more activity in your life, but he's taught you so much things about, being resilient, the way he's overcome cancer and his reactions to things, and being a good person himself. Like, he just seems to be the ideal role model that you obviously are trying to mimic, and obviously take all the good parts out of that. So that's a really nice answer. I like that one. Going back to parenthood a little bit, so what are the misconceptions, and I know you've got a couple because you mentioned them earlier, but what are some of the misconceptions or prejudices that you've experienced being a stay-at-home dad?
Well, I think, there are a few of them, really. I think when you're, like I said, we didn't really think too much about it when we made the decision. It was afterwards and people's reactions that kind of made me aware that it was, or more aware that it was an unusual thing. I think lots of people tend to think that you're not really doing anything. Like, a friend of mine was, when I was talking to him recently, this is fairly recent actually, a couple of months ago, and he was, we were talking about doing something, and he made the comment, well, you've got loads of time on your hands, so if you want to. And I kind of thought, you've got loads of time on your hands, and I didn't take offense to it, but I thought, yeah, he doesn't have children, and I kind of thought, yeah, I'd love you to come and babysit for a day, and then say that. It's just, I think that understanding of actually what you do. I think when you're thinking about mum, the mother, I think that goes hand in hand with a thing that's more natural to see a mother with children. I think some people, when you think of dad with children, it is slightly thought of as a different thing. It's maybe thought of as, some people, like I said earlier, some people don't get to see their kids because they're working. Some dads don't get to see their kids until the weekend or something. So maybe when they see their kids, it's more about a treat time or going out or, doing that kind of thing. I think when you think of the everyday things, they're the jobs that no one really talks about. And unless you're, a mum or a dad that's doing them, those are the kind of things that get forgotten. The things of, potty training and, just making sure meals are on the table for them in the day, and, your partner when they come home and that kind of thing, just the running of a house, all that kind of stuff. It's normal stuff, but I think that's the stuff that kind of is easy to forget,
And as you said earlier, it's those details that you're missing from the Instagram reel. Like, you're missing it from the highlight reel because nobody's really talking about it. And the great thing about what you said as a prejudice or a misconception, mostly, is to bring it into bigger subjects or wider topics. You could take it in terms of the Black Lives Matter and even the COVID pandemic. If nobody has actually experienced being stopped by the police just because of the race they are, or just because of the color of their skin, or if nobody has known anybody who has been affected by COVID, people can't fathom what that actually is like, or the severity of the situation when it comes to Black Lives Matter, for instance. And I was listening to something just earlier today, and it just says people find it really difficult if they haven't gone through that situation. And it's funny that your friend had mentioned the same thing of their interpretation of what a stay-at-home dad is doesn't really resonate with him because he's never understood it, he's never been around it, he doesn't know anything beyond his bubble. So I think that's really important to, I think, feed people knowledge of, you know, what does it entail. And I feel like women do speak to other women groups and communities about it, but everybody has their own experiences, and obviously you've got your own unique experience with it. So yeah, you talk to your partner.
I think that's a life lesson, isn't it? I think, you know, if you haven't experienced something or been through something, it's very, very difficult to judge it, you know, whatever it is. And you reminded me of another thing, actually. It's interesting talking back to kind of, you know, postnatal depression. And I was thinking the other day about mums specifically, lots of people saying two things. One, it's very difficult when you have the kids, your social life kind of takes a back seat, and you may kind of not see your friends to be able to download and not be able to, you know, get that relief and that kind of, you know, because everybody, I always think everybody needs a stress buster. You know, if you're at work, you need to have something, whatever it is, if it's a good book, if it's, you know, watching a football match, you know, seeing a friend, whatever it is, you need something. And I think those stages of people's lives, you know, whether it's mums that are just breastfeeding or, you know, whatever it is, or a little bit, you know, I guess I've experienced a little bit of it when you're with your kids all the time, and then the evening comes and they won't sleep, and, you know, you're doing that all evening, and then, you know, they're waking up in the night. It's that kind of cycle. So I was thinking about that, but also I was thinking about that thing where you have the people thinking, when are you going to go back to work, and that next stage of your careers. And there is a level of people thinking, you know, you've done enough of that now it's time to go and start working and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of them. It's very, very tricky. But, you know, everyone goes through it that has children. It's not, you know, a unique thing. It's just something that you have to think about, I guess.
And just like I said earlier, it's just spreading the knowledge and putting the stories out there, because a lot of times if you aren't communicating that, people don't know. So it's almost like be vocal about it, or, you know, find an avenue that you can talk to people about it. So sometimes I remember somebody writing a blog about their own experience, completely unrelated to fatherhood and children, but they found that their blog was resonating with a lot of people around the world. And you just forget that sometimes you think that this is your experience, but a lot of people could be experiencing, you know, similar mindset and similar lifestyle to you, which is, it should be in a way humbling to think, you know, I'm not the only one, because people like to think of themselves as so special and individual, right? But it's just like we're kind of not. Like we're going through history, we're repeating the same thing. So it's like nothing really changes. Okay, so going back to parenthood, what tips would you offer another stay-at-home dad, or even a working dad for that matter, who can take more responsibility with their young one's upbringing? What key nuggets of advice would you give? Answer questions about space.
Yeah, definitely that. I think it's very important not to be, you know, to make your decisions for your family. And when you've made your decision, if you're a stay-at-home dad, to not let any opinions about, you know, maybe negative opinions about what you do bother you. You just have to remember what you're doing at that moment is right for your family. It's very easy to, you know, when you get a comment, it might be an innocent comment, but a comment of you having lots of time on your hands, or, you know, when are you going to get a job, or, you know, these kind of things, they slip out very, very easily. Don't let those get to you. And I mean, it's the same kind of themes, isn't it? Communication. I think it's very important to talk and to keep talking to your friends and your partner. And, you know, when you get into routines that might be very, very different than what you're used to, just, you know, having that time of the week where you can go for a pint, or, you know, go and watch a football game, or, you know, get some exercise. For me now, my routine now is, now I'm kind of a bit more on top of my fitness. If I can have some time in the evening to, you know, have a workout, or, you know, go for a run, or, you know, whatever it is, that kind of thing kind of gets my balance back. You know, I might have a stressful day, but if I goes back to those football days when running onto the six-a-side pitch would just feel like all my stresses were kind of reset. It's kind of like that now. If I you know, jump on a rowing machine or something for half an hour, I get off and think, okay, I'm ready to deal with it again. But I think it's whatever your you know, your release is, make sure you schedule that in as much as you can. You might not be able to do it every day, but in the week, make sure you've got some time to yourself scheduled. Communication with your partner and your friends, obviously, you know, don't let things fester, and don't let things become more than what they could be. You know, it's that old thing, isn't it? A problem shared is a problem halved. It's a cliche thing, but it's really, really helpful. Especially, I would say, more than just talking to people, try and talk to people that have either done it before, maybe another stay-at-home dad, or at least other dads. I think that's really, really helpful. Whether it's a kids group, or, you know, an NCT group, or maybe just a friend of yours that's got kids, I find that those conversations are more valuable in terms of, you know, someone listening and going, yeah, I know that, or I had this problem, or what I do. You know, those kind of comments and those conversations are really valuable, because you suddenly feel like, you know, someone understands, and someone else has been through that. You know, I think they're very, very helpful. And as I said earlier, it's, you know, worth repeating, don't compare yourself to other people. You know, your situation is always unique to you, and your family's needs are always, you know, unique to your family. And I think when you do spend too much time thinking, what have other people done? You know, I haven't done that. Am I a bad dad for not doing that? And should we have done this by now? And same thing as when your kids develop. Children develop at different rates. They do things at different speeds. Some people pick up skill here and don't pick up another skill till later. And it's very easy to fall into traps where you start thinking, oh, mine's not doing that. Are we doing something wrong? Or, you know, had loads of conversations with people like that. And I think it's healthy to talk, but just don't read too much into those things, and just stay grounded. I think that's very important.
Great answer. I like the fact that you were saying it's individual, and people grow at children grow at their own rate. And I remember a parent saying, I think it came from a female, saying, we're all just winging it. We all have no idea what we're doing. Like, there is no manual for it. It's all just winging it and seeing how it turns out. And or you're ruining your children in your own very special way.
yeah, that's true. I thought of another thing as well. I think if you are someone that, you know, you exercise regularly, I think something that I found very, very difficult when we had newborns, particularly, and you know, the sleep was, you know, not plentiful. You know, I remember hearing I remember hearing a saying, sometimes you go with what you've got, or you don't go at all. And I remember thinking that's really relevant. And I remember hearing Eddie Hall say it a little bit less poetically, where he said, sometimes you just train tired, or you don't train at all. And that always resonates with me. You know, in the early days, I would think, you know, in the morning, I'd think, right, I'm going to whatever, do some weights tonight. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to whatever, jump on the rowing machine. And it would get to whenever you get the baby down and think, I'm just so tired. You know, I'll feel better tomorrow. And you put it off, and before you know it, a few weeks have gone past and you haven't really exercised. And now I always think of that. I always think, you either train tired or you don't train. So it's up to you, you know, get it done. Or, you know, obviously if you're suffering from exhaustion, you just got to get to bed. But when you get a little bit more of an equilibrium, you're kind of often tired. So, you know, sometimes you just have to go with what you go with what you've got, or you don't go at all. If that thing.
And I remember, that's a really good one, but I remember speaking to, I can't remember whether it was another S&C coach or was it an athlete, but basically what they were saying is, if you go to the gym and, or whatever you're trying to do, if you're training, whatever it is, if the first 5 to 10 minutes, and usually I do a lot of mobility within those 5-10 minutes, so it wasn't a conventional warm-up or a cardio warm-up like jumping on the treadmill. Because I was weightlifting, it would be, right, let's mobilize and activate the muscles. So if within those 5-10 minutes, if you didn't feel better and you were still tired, go home, because you're not going to be productive in that. And that always resonated with me, because within that time, within those 5 or 10 minutes where you've changed, you're trying to get mentally in the game, in the gym. And that's where I was speaking to when I was doing those sessions, where I was saying, we're getting our body prepared for the session, but we're also getting our mind into the session.
It's true.
And when you're in that state of mind, you either feel great and you know you're going to get a good workout in, or you know you're doing something, which is fantastic. But when you are still exhausted after that, you're like, well, you know, I'm not going to be productive. I'm probably going to do myself more harm than good. Let's just call it quits. And that, I think, a lot of people.
Then you have to be responsible for saying, no, that's it. You know, can't do it today. I think
you need to have two things when you're training, especially if it's something like weightlifting or something, that you need to bring intention and attention to it. And if you're not bringing those two things, then you may as well call it quits, because you are doing more harm than good, because you're not in that space. And I feel like a lot of people just kind of go through the motions, and it's fine, but you're not really, it's not specific about who would you recommend as a guest on Unapologetically You. So there is no pressure in terms of, a lot of people are like, well, what do you mean who is a guest? I'm like, look, we've had people from Michael Jordan, from Michelle Obama, to you should talk to my best friend. So everyone is welcome. So we would like to know, who would you like to hear from as a guest on our next podcast?
Well, I guess two things come to mind. One, you should probably talk to my dad, as I've spoken about him so many times. He'll probably tell you lots of interesting things. But I always like to hear from people that I find inspiring. So I think anybody with a story to tell, that maybe has been through hardship or has maybe overcome something, I'm always interested in stories like that. I'm also a massive boxing fan, so anything that you can link into the boxing world would interest me hugely. So that's probably, without being specific, those are the kind of things I'm thinking.
Well, I remember just finishing a cast with somebody, and they mentioned 3 people. Like, can I mention 3? And I was like, okay. But the good thing is that they were all coaches, and they're all phenomenal in that area. So I'm like, yeah, that's fine. We can have an abundance of guests. Just give me the details. But I definitely want to get your dad on here. So have a quiet word with him, and we'll try and arrange some time. But definitely
he would do it without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
Okay, good. But definitely boxing. You know what? I can go from dancing to obviously body weight training that I've been doing a lot during lockdown. Boxing is one of my favorite things at the moment. Like shadow boxing, I've been doing since, I want to say, the year before last. So I'm very much into, if you're feeling angry or if you're feeling like you really want to work out, it's a really good way of doing it. And I'm trying to intertwine it with my other sets of training. So it's almost like I was saying earlier, like you want high intensity, you want low intensity, and there's definitely a difference between boxing and yoga and dancing and things like that. So I feel like, if you know of anyone, let us know. And if our audience knows of any boxers, then please do let us know. But just wanted to end and say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and talking to us and being so honest and vulnerable about what's been going on, especially with your training and injuries, and talking about where you are now. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I hope I haven't waffled on too much, and if there's anything interesting that people can take away, that's a good thing.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.